We've had a lot of interest in the CO2 versus green gas video, so we decided this week we would take a little bit of time to take on some of the issues that we either missed telling you about or some of the things that you asked us to go into more detail about regarding that video. So this week we're going to tackle that. Our first question is, if you're using propane instead of green gas, is it necessary to add silicone oil? The answer is yes. When you look at the can for the green gas, you'll notice that it says that it has silicone oil added, and obviously propane doesn't have any of that in there. So what we recommend on occasion is to take a little bit of the silicone oil, squirt it into the cap, and then screw it on, and that way you can add a little bit of silicone oil to keep your O-rings from going dry. Obviously the danger from not doing that is eventually the O-rings will dry up and they'll start leaking at some point. So remember to do that from time to time. Our next question is, which is better for beginners, CO2 or green gas? And honestly, there's no right answer to that question. For some people, I think the CO2 might be a better idea because it's more readily available. You can get it at department stores and sporting goods stores, that kind of thing, where the green gas is a little harder to come by. But outside of that, I don't think one of them lends itself to being more user-friendly than the other. So you're really going to have to look at all the information and decide which one of the two is right for you. Someone asked, which kicks harder, CO2 or green gas? Well, you're obviously talking about blowback guns because the non-blowback guns have no recoil whatsoever. So in this case, we're talking about the gas blowback guns that when you shoot them, they actually recoil and give you a little bit of a kick. Now, I really don't think the kind of gas that you're using, whether it's CO2 or green gas, is going to make the determining factor as to whether the gun recoils more or less. I think the determining factor is going to be more the weight of the slide. So if you're dealing with a metal gun with a metal slide that's a little heavier, you're going to feel more recoil. If it's a plastic gun with a plastic slide, you're obviously going to feel less recoil. And if you're dealing with a non-blowback gun, you're probably going to be dealing with absolutely no recoil at all. Another person asked, can I use green gas or CO2 in the same gun? That's kind of an unusual question, so it's important to understand exactly what you need to do in order to be able to change from CO2 to green gas. This gun here is a Vertec 92, which is a blowback gun using CO2. In this case, we can use the same gun with a green gas magazine, and it still operates in the same fashion. So the answer to your question is yes, you can use CO2 and green gas in the same gun, provided you're using the correct magazines that either take CO2 or green gas. You obviously can't take a CO2 magazine and somehow get green gas to go into it, and vice versa with the green gas magazines. So as long as you're using the right equipment, yes, you can use CO2 or green gas interchangeably, provided you're using the right equipment. One of the things I messed up on is green gas flammable. Well, if you watched our CO2 versus green gas video, you may have noticed that I said that green gas is an inert gas. That's not necessarily true. So we decided to take a bunch of different brands of green gas, try them together, and see whether or not they were flammable.
Green gas.
Green gas is green gas. This brand of green gas flammable. There you go.
Yes, it's flammable.
Brand X.
Still green gas.
Okay. Big giant fireball. There you go.
Yes.
Fantastic. Now the real big question is duster gas. Show me the duster gas.
Do we know?
Let's show me the front of it. Is that the front of it?
This is the front of it.
Oh.
This is a lame ass front.
Okay. All right. Let's see what happens.
It blew itself out.
Thank you very much. So as you may have noticed, green gas is flammable. There are some people out there that say they've got some kind of green gas that's like a refrigerant or something like that that is not flammable. I haven't seen that yet. So if you've got it out there, that's great. I would just assume if you have green gas that it is flammable and treat it that way. Another person asked, how does temperature affect the velocity of a gas gun? Well, to figure this one out, we took a CO2 powered gun, fired it at room temperature through a chronograph, and got an average velocity of around 300 feet per second. We took that same gun, put it in the freezer for a while to get the temperature down, brought it back out, and fired it through the chronograph again and found that the velocity was at least 100 feet per second lower than what it was at room temperature. So you get the idea. You fire a gun in freezing cold weather, you're going to get a much lower velocity than, say, if you're firing it on a 90-degree sunny day. And I think it affects both green gas and CO2 equally. Another interesting question we got is, does the rate of fire affect the velocity of the BBs coming out of the barrel? In other words, if I fire at full auto, is that going to affect the velocity of the BBs coming out of the gun? And the answer is yes. To figure this one out, we took a green gas gun, measured the temperature of it, then loaded it up, fired it full auto at the target, and measured the temperature again. We noticed that the temperature was at least 10 to 15 degrees below what it was before we fired it. So if you listen to the last question, when the temperature goes down, the velocity goes down. So there's obviously going to be a great disparity between the velocity of the first BB you shoot and then firing full auto, and then the last BB you shoot is obviously going to be much slower. A lot of people are concerned when they're buying a green gas gun or a CO2 gun is what velocity is allowable at the range that I'm going to. I've noticed a lot of CQB indoor ranges generally tend to limit you to around 300 feet per second, while the outdoor ranges generally are around 450 feet per second. It's best to check with the range in advance if you're going to be using them, so that way when you go to buy a gun, you can get one that's appropriate for the place where you're going to be using it. And I know that's not going to make a lot of people happy to know that your gun's going to be limited to one place or another, but that's how it is, so it's good to check it out beforehand, and that way you don't get a gun that you're not going to be able to use. Our last question is, how many shots can I get out of a CO2 non-blowback gun? Well, the answer to that question in general is you're going to get more shots out of it than you're going to get out of the same gun if it were a blowback gun. Now, outside of that, how many shots in general does any non-blowback gun? Depends on the temperature that you're shooting at, your rate of fire that you're shooting, the weight of the BBs, and a number of other factors. So it's really impossible to answer that question in general. But if you're using a non-blowback gun, you are going to get more shots than a blowback gun. So that's about it. I hope we answered your questions. If you have any more, feel free to either email them to us or post them on the YouTube site, and we'll do our best to answer them. Or, better yet, stop in here at the store. You can try the gun out for yourself and hopefully answer your own questions. But if we can be of help, we're here to do that as well. And that's the nice thing about this store, is you can try everything before you buy it, so when you go home, you'll be a lot happier. So, until next time, we'll see you again.
Look happy.